There's no more chapters left in the book. You've reached the end. And I'm hoping that through this experience, you've had the opportunity to fill up that toolbox. Because as I mentioned in the very beginning, communication is not something you won't practice. And interpersonal communication, you will utilize all the time. So my goal throughout the semester was to give you some information, some ideas, some direction, so you can be reflective upon how you're communicating, how others are communicating with you, and how you can do that better. So let's close this out with workplace relationships. What we want to talk about is the nature of a work relationship. There's a culture in a workplace relationship, the networks that are formed, the technology, how that's impacting workplaces. Over the last 2 months, technology has stepped up big, and we are now more and more online because of a need to be. There's a hierarchy at work, how communication works, and of course the bad environments that you can find at work. Now, workplace relationships are unique because they're not necessarily a relationship of choice. You're not picking your coworker, someone else is doing that for you. In addition to that, there's a hierarchy. There's a boss and there's workers. When you're lucky, you're the boss. But when you're the boss, you actually get to find out there's other bosses. You're reporting to someone else. Or perhaps you're at one of the jobs where the final boss is that customer. There's a level of intimacy that goes on in there. You have some shared experiences as well as shared policies. Uh, when you show up to work, you're expected to look a certain way. That's not just come as you are, express yourself. That's not really most workplaces. Work is also one of those voluntary. It's like friends. They can really enrich your life and you have a need for them. But at the end of the day, if you work or not, that's going to be your choice. And so it is a voluntary experience. And just like other relationships, when they end, sometimes we choose to find a new one. Oftentimes in work, those two overlap at some area, which can make for unique situations. Now, when we're talking about culture, we mentioned that cultures need to be learned, they need to be experienced or lived, and then they are shared. Work does all of this. We have to, when we start a new job, we need to come in there and we learn it. And so we learn the traditions, we learn the beliefs, we learn the rules of behavior. We don't go out to the customers and be angry and upset with them. That's not what we learn. We learn to take a little bit of the bad with the good. When a customer is mad, we don't get mad back. Instead, we kind of take it and then we try to get down to the root of the problem. We use a lot of those communication skills. There are workplace norms and there are workplace artifacts. Perhaps it's the symbols of where you work. It may be the computer, it may be other things that kind of represent status. So that's what we're talking about with artifacts. The corner office versus the middle cubicle, things of that variety. One thing that I always fall back upon when I'm thinking about work is Ernest Borman's symbolic convergence theory. Now, Borman's theory basically states that we create our reality through shared experiences. In other words, if I was to say Mad as a Hatter and you're an Alice in Wonderland fan, you know what I'm talking about. Same thing happens at school and at work, where we have these shared experiences. If you think back to when we were in classrooms, what we would do in the classroom is if something came up, it might be the joke for the entire semester. It may be something that when you meet someone 10 years down the road, you say, yeah, I remember in the time in class when this happened, and everyone's like, oh yeah. And that's a shared experience that has bonded us. And so within groups such as at a workplace, those are massively important. They kind of really create the experience of going through something together, and that impacts how we relate to the people as well as how we communicate with them. So when he talks about shared group fantasies, this is more of a case of, it's not the fantasies like, oh, we all dream of being on a beach and the palm trees and the ocean. It's not that type of fantasy. It's more of a shared fantasy of the experience that we shared together. So in other words, we may have, maybe someone did something really uncoordinated at work. You know, they're leaving the kitchen and they just dumped the whole tray. And originally it was 2 plates. But because as we continue to share it and we say, hey, don't pull an owl and drop all the plates, instead it grows from, oh, it was 2 plates to, man, there was like 5 plates on there and 6 drinks, and it just becomes more. And it's a way of our sharing our experiences that bonds us together. And we exchange these in order to be cohesive, to come together as a group. And that's one of the things you notice when you're entering into the culture. They may speak in languages that you just don't understand. And it's because that's a shared experience. And so as you become integrated into it, you suddenly know these experiences, you know these stories. And then when the new person comes in, you're like, they don't even know what pulling an owl is. And it's a case of you need to bring them in. So the symbolic convergence theory really is important in groups. And as you go through it, you're sharing that experience, you become closer. Now there are networks that we find at work. There's organizational, which has normally 3 characteristics, and it's the network in which information flows. There's the nature of the information, how it's moderated, and where it's spread out to. Those are your 3 characteristics of it. Is that it's generated, it actually flows through the organization, and how it's disseminated through there. Okay? Does it come from a hierarchical position where, okay, the boss says it, it comes down to us, and then it comes down to the very newbies, the new people at the company? Or is it like the gossip network? Well, normally the gossip network begins over in that office, and then the gossip comes from there, and then it spreads, and then it works its way up the chain. So there can be different networks that function within the same organization. Some will be formal, some will be informal. And now we're even finding virtual networks. You know, that's the thing. When we go onto social media now, we're suddenly concerned, what if my boss sees this? I mean, we've all heard the stories of someone going online and saying, hey, here I am at the Rockies game, and I called in sick. And of course, that goes back through a network at work where if someone sees it, maybe someone that didn't get the promotion you got, and suddenly the boss knows about it, and suddenly you're in trouble. So there are different types of networks that you encounter at work. There's organizational climate. Now, this is very important. You want to find one that meets who you are. That's why you see some people go to work for these tech companies that are really laid back. They come into work in casual wear all the time. And there are other ones where they always have to have a tie, and they always have to have a suit on. And that's part of their climate. And that goes beyond just appearances and integration into it. But who do you trust? We talked about the gossiper in the corner office. Well, maybe that is not the person you want to go speak to when you have a personal problem, because you automatically know they're not going to be supportive. They're just going to spread the gossip. So interpersonal communication is very important in these organizational climates. It's like a family. If you have a family that no one communicates, there's friction that's caused and there's breakdowns that occur. Same thing within the office. You can have a defensive climate where everyone's out for themselves. They're afraid of being attacked, so they don't really listen. Instead, what they're doing is they're thinking about, okay, how does this affect me? And how can I get an advantage over it? And that creates a defensive environment or climate where people do not communicate. There's a supportive climate. This is the climate that where you go into the office And if you're having trouble, if someone brings you coffee, you don't expect it, someone surprises you with flowers, or there's support. It's that we're all in this together kind of thing, and so we're all shooting for the same goal, and so that makes it very important within the network. Now, technology. It used to be, up until about 2 months ago, that we were all very focused on the face-to-face. I got to have FaceTime with the person. I got to see them. I got to talk to them. I got to be in close proximity. Well, suddenly, we're no longer there. We're now doing a lot of things by email. CMC is computer moderated communication. What we're doing right now, that's it. Skype would be another option. There are many out there, from Zoom to WebEx, and it's growing. Now there's another thing that's coming into the workplace, and I don't know if you've seen it yet. Some places have really tried to start pushing this. Gamification. We've all gotten very used to computer games, and the little rewards. We're not really receiving these big rewards for things, but somehow it gives us satisfaction. So they started taking these principles that you see on a computer game and moving them into the workplace. So perhaps rather than saying, oh, you have to make X number of sales and putting the pressure on you to reach that goal, instead they come at you with this angle. If you make this number of sales, you'll get these company bonus points that you can spend on extra time off, or you can get a company logo t-shirt, or you can get the special pin set. It's like they reward you receive in a game, and it's kind of set aside, and these gaming elements really have created some extra production in places, because the pressure of always, you need to meet this bar, and if you don't, we're going to fire you, that becomes a very negative type of culture. However, if they say, you accumulate 1,000 points, I'm going to give you an extra day off. That is a different type of motivation. That's a positive one, where people are like, yes, I'm going to go out there, I need that extra day off, so I'm going to work extra hard this week to get those points so I can get that day off. Works out much better than saying, either you do it or you're fired. That's so negative, so hurtful. So gamification, it's finding its way into a workplace. Watch for it. You may experience it more and more as you go forward. I know even some restaurants have started utilizing this. So we'll see how that goes. Cyber slacking. This was always the fear. As we moved onto the internet, we're going to do nothing but cyber slacking. My sales force, they're sitting there and they're playing cards on the computer all day long, and they're not, I know they could be more productive if I just took away the card game. Well, in some cases, they found that taking away the cyber slacking actually decreases motivation. Because now, instead of having their game of cards they can play on the computer, well, I can't do that, so they find excuses to get away from their desk. Some people can semi-multitask, and so that's a case of, okay, they can listen to a customer's complaint for 10 minutes far easier if they're watching something on the computer, versus that if they just have to sit there and focus on, of course, when you're listening to a customer's complaint, you want to get the main points and you want to use all the communication tools, but at the same time you want to give them the opportunity to breathe, and sometimes that's a little bit easier when cyber slacking is involved. I don't recommend cyber slacking. I'm just saying there's pros and cons to each of these aspects, to include gamification, to include computer moderated communication. All these have the positive and negatives. So you look at them, you decide. Now, relationships and types. There's your professional peers. When I go to a conference, I'm sitting down with other professors that teach at colleges, and those are my professional peers. We are all in the same career field. You find that with nurses, you find that with veterinarians, you find that even with plumbers and electricians and all these different things. Your professional peers are people that have shared some of the stories you've gone through. At the same time, they have different perspectives. So it's important to build some professional peers as you're going forward in the workplace. So that way, if you encountered a problem, you can say, hey, God, I remember meeting Sam at that conference. If I call her, she can give me information and I have a resource. There's coworkers who are considered friends, collegial friends. These are the ones that maybe when you started off you weren't friends, but you're on the night shift and security, and they're the person that's always there. And oddly enough, sometimes you spend more time with that person than you do with your own spouse. So you become friends with some of these people. And in some cases, expected. On an ambulance, they're expected to be friends, not just co-workers. Police, you expect them to be partners. I even call them something of that variety. So you're like, oh, they must be friends. There's special pairs, equivalent status coworkers who you trust. These are the ones that aren't the gossiper in the corner office. These are the ones you can actually feel like, oh man, I had such a rough day yesterday, or I had a problem at home, and you're bringing it into work. But this is the person you can sit down and talk to. They can give you some positive feedback. Or maybe you're going for that promotion. This is the person you go talk to and say, all right, what do I need to do? And so you do a bit of self-disclosure. You're becoming vulnerable. You're doing that social penetration theory where you're peeling back that onion. And these are the people you trust with it. Of course, because they are their special peers, they're almost friends, that if they betray that, that can become a problem. And then our virtual peers. Now, this is going to be interesting going forward. There's probably going to be more and more books written about your virtual peers. What level of trust do you give them? I mean, you're online with them. Someone could hit a record button at any moment. So can they be a special peer? Can you, be vulnerable with them? Can you express the truth to them? Or are they going to be more of the professional level where you just don't really go into personal matters? Now, in pairs, there can be mixed status relationships. You can have the friendly one that's also your boss, but you have to kind of separate that out. You can have a virtual pair that you meet and then suddenly you become friends. There's different types. So just because they're professional doesn't mean they can't also be your friend, or doesn't mean they won't become your virtual. So they can change and moderate. It's a dynamic situation. Superior and subordinate relationships. Have you had a friend that ever got promoted and now they're in charge of you? And you're like, boy, that person really became a jerk. But at the same time, they're like, wow, you've really let me down. I really needed your support. So when there are dynamic changes like that, that structure can change as well. A lot of people are, no, I'm not going to be friends with someone at work because that's work. This is my life. And that's fine. You have to find what works for you. Of course, there's the trainer, the trainee. The first month or the first couple of weeks you're at a new job, they assign you to someone, your mentor, and you follow them around, you learn what they know. And of course, this can create some friction later on because perhaps they train you and that's the way the company's always done it. And then suddenly you find a better way, you think. And you go to them and you say, well, this is what I think we really should do when we have this problem. And they say, that's not how we did it. This is how I trained you. And suddenly that creates some friction. A lot of our relationships fall into the supervisory relationship, where there's a supervisor and then there's you, or you're the supervisor and then there's someone working for you. And these can be very difficult types of situations. You always hear about the open door policy. Yeah, but it's open, but you never feel like it's totally free. And so you have to really kind of get into the culture to determine how your peer situation will work out. Communication. Communication with supervisors and advocating for yourself can be very difficult at times because they say, this is the workplace, I'm the boss, these are my rules. And if you don't like it, this is a voluntary relationship, you can go. So you can run into that. But at the same time, they have an investment in you, and your success is their success. So with communication, when you're trying to talk up the hierarchy, it's always best to kind of go in there, if you have a problem, with a solution. If you have a complaint, you state it in such a way that's not attacking them. You use the I language. I feel that there's a problem. You're not saying there's a problem. Instead, you're kind of shifting it, and you're taking accountability for how you feel. If you're going to have to communicate, always try to plan beforehand. Always have an idea of what you want to say and what the potential outcomes are, both positive and negative. All right, I go in ask for a raise. The best thing that could happen, they give me that raise. The worst thing that could happen, they fire me. All right, how will that change that? I mean, is the possibility of firing so overwhelming that you don't ask for that raise? Do you avoid that conversation? So always have a plan beforehand, and that way you can also kind of disastrophize and look at, okay, if this occurs, this is where I'm going. Have an idea. Know why your supervisor should agree with you. You don't go in there and say, well, I need a raise because I want more money. No. You want to say, I've really excelled at the job. I've brought new ideas in. I've been creative. And I really feel I have benefited the company. And this raise will help me go forward and come up with more ideas and keep me motivated. That's a good reason to agree with you. Tailor your message. Know your boss a little bit. Not personally, necessarily, but know their style. Are they a person that really wants to really cut to the meat of the discussion? They're one of those people that just tell me the facts and move on. Or are they a person that likes stories, that likes, kind of drawing in the other elements, where they really like to explore the idea? That will help you change your message. I mean, if you need to be direct, go in there and have your message bullet pointed. I need the raise because A, B, C. Boom. Or if they like stories, last week, let me tell you how I do extra at this job. Last week I had a call, and at that call, the customers were really upset. But I stepped back and I realized we could help this customer. Matter of fact, we could make them a lifelong customer. So this is what I did. That's your storyteller. Okay? Know your supervisor's knowledge. In some cases, you might have a supervisor that's not knowledgeable in your area of work. For instance, your supervisor in a restaurant may be the host. What does the host know about the kitchen? So you may need to bring in information that'll help them along. You'll also find this in businesses. Sales department may know nothing about IT. IT may know nothing about research and development. Research and development may know nothing about, you see where I'm going. Basically, if you have a supervisor that's not overly knowledgeable about your job, you want to bring them up to speed without making them feel that you're talking down to them. Don't go in there and throw a bunch of lingo about computers at them if they know nothing about computers. Instead, explain a process to them, and then they can understand it. Now, this is one, creating a coalition at work. Now, there's different types of coalitions you can see. There's always the coalition of the disgruntled, the ones that are ready to throw the revolution at any moment. They're just ready to take up arms and storm the building. And then there's always the coalition of, oh, this is how we've always done things, this is how we're going to continue doing them. So understand there are different elements within the workplace that might cause friction. If you have a new idea, that coalition of, well, this is how we've always done things and we've been here for 50 years and so I don't see a reason to change it, understand you'll have to address that. If you join in with the coalition of the revolution, beware, because oftentimes those are the people that are not long for that job, that they work counter to the company. And so if you get labeled with the coalition of people that are ready to fire all the bosses and change how the company works and move it to another state, you may find yourself on the outs at the job. Now, communication. Communication with subordinates. It's important to emphasize what your goal is with them, the importance of communication, and what communication is important. If you're really focusing on an aspect of it, like the number of widgets that's going out of the factory, you really don't want to draw in the company picnic. Instead, you want to emphasize what's important in the communication. Once again, we get back to that: listen to understand and not to respond. When an employee comes to you, or someone that's working for you comes to you and says, I need to talk, take the time to talk to them, to actually listen to them. Now, if you're really busy and you need to say, okay, not now, not now, don't stop there, because the not now will just be a no to them. Instead, do the I can't talk right now. Can I see you in a half hour? I'll set up time and we can talk. That makes them feel empowered and important, and it will help that relationship you have with them. And when you have to do an evaluation, don't attack. Don't frame the communication to hurt them. Instead, realize they're who you're working with. They are the people that are making you successful. And so what you need to do is, if you need to correct, do it in a manner that's not attacking them. Don't go in there and say, you did the stupidest things I've ever seen. That'll put them immediately on the defensive. Instead, hey, the choice you made on this phone call, I'm not sure if that was the appropriate one. How do you think we could have handled it better? And then you can kind of direct from there. Be aware of the subordinate's feelings. Work is a portion of a person's life. Don't expect it to be 100% of their life if you're the boss. Instead, understand that they have other issues going on. They may have someone at home that's ill. They may have lost their dog recently. There's a number of things that could be impacting them. And so be willing, if you're going into a conversation with them, to hear some of that, not as excuses, but more of as a understanding of where they're coming from, and share relevant information. As a boss, you're kind of in a unique position where you're not the onion very often, that you're more of, you don't want to share the relevant information from your life, but you want to be able to hear theirs. So make sure you keep, if you're criticizing, onto the relevant information. Compliments should always be authentic. You know, if you just go around and every morning you walk by, you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job. Awesome. Good job. Good job. Good. By the third day or the end of the week, no one is listening anymore, because it's not authentic. It's just something you do. Be professional. Like I said, every time I come on here, I always make sure I put on a button-up shirt and I look professional. I'm not up here with my t-shirt on and just, hey dudes, what's up? No, be professional and understand what professional means within your culture. Because in that business culture, this may not be professional. This may be way too casual. Where's my tie? Where's my vest and my jacket? This is way too casual. So understand what professionalism is within your culture. Be concise. If you're going to compliment someone, don't say, you're doing a great job, and walk away. No, instead make it something that attaches to them. Going back to Borman's symbolic convergence theory. Make it a case of where, hey, you know, that report you did last week, the summary that you gave, really did a great job and explained things, and it was very helpful. That's the type of work I need to see. Boom, automatically. You've created a moment in time which you both shared and had an experience with, and now you have a connection. and understand if a person enjoys being recognized privately or publicly. The last thing you want to do is bring the introvert out in front of the office and give them an award for being awesome that week, and it just scares them. It makes them want to go up and be in a shell. At the same time, you know, you may have a person that really likes the public recognition, likes to stand out before their peers, and when you're just constantly just saying, "Hey, good job," behind closed doors, it feels insincere to them because you're not expressing it publicly. So get to know what a person and an employee likes. When you're criticizing, always be professional. Don't get personal. That's not when you're going to use the I statements. You're not going to say, "I hate when you," because you're creating a comment. Instead, in this workplace, we need to work together. And you kind of make it where it's a case of bringing the entirety together. Be professional. Once again, same thing. You're seeing the same things on criticizing and complimenting. Be concise. Don't just say, "Boy, I hate the job that you do. You do terrible." Well, that just drains all the energy. But if you can give a circumstance or a situation, the way this was handled could have been handled better, type of thing. Be empathetic. Understand these are people you're talking to. This isn't a computer. Even on the virtual world, understand we're talking this way, but I'm a person, you're a person. So there needs to be empathy. And be prepared. Don't come in with vagueness. I know another thing that drives people insane when they're going to be criticized is the preemptive one. I don't have time to talk about this, but I want to talk to you on Tuesday, and it's a Friday. Your employee is going to go through their head all weekend long. What did I do? Oh, I messed up. I can't. And by the time you get to that Tuesday meeting, they're ready for a fight. They're loaded for bear. They're going to come in there, and it might be actually you're going to compliment them. But in their mind, they've made it the worst situation ever. You're going to fire them, and so be prepared. So don't bring up, "Hey, let's have a talk," until you're ready to have that talk. Be prepared that when you go in, it's a voluntary relationship. Anything could happen, and any response is possible. As we talked about, this is communication. It's very dynamic. It's very changing. There might be emotions. There may not be emotions. Just be prepared for anything and think about how you will handle those situations. Bad environments. Bullying and cyberbullying. If you encounter these in a workplace, you really need to start looking at, is this a voluntary relationship you want to be in? What is the reward versus what you're giving? Bullying can be physical bullying. It can be cyberbullying. It could be, they're going to publish pictures of you, or they're going to say horrible things about you on social media. That is a common form of bullying. Especially that whole, I'm going to go home and I'm going to go crazy and everyone's my friend on social media and I'm just going to, boom. Isolation. That's another form of bullying where instead of being aggressive towards you, they just ignore you. They don't interact with you. They put you in your corner. They're waiting for you to leave is what they're kind of doing. That's another bad work environment. Or where they don't give you the information you need. They hold it as their power. They're the gatekeepers. If you want that report, I need you to fill out these 12 forms. I need you to dance, and then I need you to spin around 3 times and say, "You're the best, you're the best, you're the best," and then I'll give you the report. That's controlling information. Information within a company should be free-flowing, and it should be not a valuable that someone's holding. And constraint of professional responsibilities. You've gone to law school, you're a lawyer, and all they do is give you paralegal work. That's not right. You've earned that degree, you should be able to do more than what they're giving you. Creation of a dangerous workplace. This can be a number of things. Violation of OSHA, where they're not following the safety protocols. Um, could even be, hey, we have a truck that the brakes are never checked and it's not safe to drive. There could be a number of situations like that. Even disgruntled workers. You're in a place where there's no security, but you have a coworker that's threatening to do something to the workplace. That can be a dangerous workplace. Verbal abuse. Sometimes you think this is just how the boss talks, but you have to realize that's not correct. If the boss is always demeaning you and just calling you curse words, that may be his communication style or her communication style, but it's not appropriate for a workplace. Or destruction of professional reputation. You go to that conference and then they all talk about you. They all bring you down. Or you go to, you apply for another job, and instead of just saying, yeah, they work here and they've done a good job, or just the limited what they're supposed to share, they go after you because they don't like you leaving, so they're just going to tear you down. So what we want to talk about today, this is our final chapter. You've made it. So make sure you're getting those other things, those little things done. So I gave you that really good grade. I want to give you a good grade. And what we talked about today was nature of workplace relationships, how a workplace is a culture, the networks we form within workplaces, how technology is impacting the workplace, from such as video conferencing, what we're doing now, all the way to gamification. How we have hierarchies at work, and we always fit somewhere in that hierarchy. Communication, is it defensive or is it supportive? What type of communication do you have there? And good environments and bad environments. So to wrap up this whole semester, one thing I really want you to take from here is these are tools for you to use. I wanted to fill up your toolbox. This isn't like chemistry where unless you're a chemist, you're not going to use it. This isn't like history where unless something comes up, unless you're a professor or a teacher or an educator of some type, history really won't come up as much. Communication happens every day. And because it happens every day, I want you to be prepared for it, to do everything from be reflective on yourself, to realize the listening style that you have. Are you a looker? Are you a listener? Are you a toucher? What is your communication style? What speaks to you? As well as how you can perhaps improve some of those other relationships, from how you're going to better communicate with your spouse or your significant other, how you can communicate with family, friends, and workplace. You've been an awesome class. I know it's been a rough semester, but you made it. So turn stuff in, email me if you got questions. Let's get to the end of this, and congratulations.